Jim Wize's manifesto, Satan is One, begins with a forensic analysis of the enemy's structural organization. It presents a world where our common perceptions of spiritual warfare fail to match the data found in the text. Most of us have been conditioned to see the adversary as a collection of independent rogue monsters, a fractured assembly of individual entities acting on their own chaotic impulses. This document argues that we are facing a highly structured, singular military collective. It's a system designed for total cohesion rather than disorganized malice. Viewing the enemy as a unified military unit changes the necessary response. You don't defend against a synchronized army the same way you hide from a lone beast. This structure is hidden within the very way the adversary is named. While righteous angels like Michael and Gabriel carry names that reflect their specific divine ministries, the devil is never granted a proper personal identity in Scripture. In original Hebrew, śāṭān is a common noun, a transient title meaning the adversary. Over time, this generic title was capitalized into the proper name, Satan, falsely granting a nameless evil in intimacy it was never intended to have. This semantic inversion successfully directed human attention toward a localized individual villain, obscuring the nameless, overarching structural force that governs the system. At the peak of this hierarchy is a nameless chief adversary. His primary role is maintaining a state of absolute, forced synchronization across the entire rebel host. The operational necessity of this unity is cited in Matthew chapter 12. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Human nature is characterized by division and internal conflict. In contrast, the demonic host operates with zero internal friction, acting as an undivided mechanism with no rogue actors. This hierarchy ensures that the Satan-in-chief and the general forces act as a single synchronized machine. The strength of this kingdom is found in this forced synchronization of purpose. By eliminating disagreement, the host achieves efficiency that individual power could never reach. Looking at the rank-and-file level, the scriptural blueprint in Mark 5:9 provides the name Legion. This title is explicitly followed by the explanation, "For we are many." These entities share a singular, dark collective consciousness. They lack individual agendas, functioning instead as the components of an undivided military hive mind. The host utilizes silent, dual-realm telecommunication to broadcast evil suggestions directly into unprotected minds. They bypass the physical senses to target the internal consciousness. The scale of this collective is defined as 1/3 of the fallen spiritual host, organized and deployed as a singular, unified weapon. Because these downloaded suggestions are silent and arrive internally, individuals without a spiritual barrier often mistake them for their own thoughts. They become unwitting proxies, executing a larger strategy while believing they are acting on their own. Identifying the adversary as a nameless, organized unit changes the nature of the engagement. It turns what seem like random obstacles into a coordinated, visible siege. However, even a perfectly unified army is limited by a strict legal framework. The collective host is not all-powerful. They are bound by judicial constraints. This is known as the Divine Leash. In the Book of Job, we see the courtroom rules in action, where the adversary must appear and receive permission before taking any specific action. These legal boundaries dictate that the collective cannot touch a human without explicit authorization from the court. The adversary functions as a subservient prosecutor. Every punitive action they take is under the oversight and authority of the Creator, who maintains absolute sovereignty over the trial. For the individual, this judicial protection manifests as a sovereign firewall, an internal defense for those who are sealed by the Spirit of truth. When a person is born again, the internal vessel is permanently occupied. This creates a legal lockout where the collective is barred from entering or manipulating the internal frequency of that person. This lockout forces the hive mind to change its strategy. Since it cannot breach the firewall, it pivots to horizontal attacks, using unsealed individuals in the surrounding environment to create discouragement and external conflict. While the enemy acts as a perfectly synchronized military unit, their entire structural advantage becomes powerless against this internal firewall. Their coordination cannot override the king's seal. This diagram represents the scriptural cosmology of a stationary, flat plane entirely enclosed beneath a crystalline firmament dome and set upon solid pillars. Within this enclosed system, the adversary does not have free rein. He is strictly bound by what the text calls the Divine Leash, granted only a temporary, restricted release, known as the Little Season. At the absolute geographic center of this plane lies the magnetic North Pole. Historical, pre-reset maps identify this central landmass as Terra de Yeso, the earthly location of Mount Zion, and the vertical axis pointing directly to the Creator's throne above the dome. Opposing this vertical authority is a singular, undivided entity. Scripture identifies this rebel host as Legion, a collective hive mind bound by absolute cohesion, operating under a forced military-grade synchronization. Legion operates with a singular purpose, but its influence is not absolute. According to the text, the rebel host is strictly confined by the terms of its release, a set of rigid cosmic boundary lines referred to as the Divine Leash. This legal restriction from the court of heaven bars the collective from direct physical intervention, creating a logistical requirement for human biological hosts. To bypass this restriction and manage its terrestrial quarantine, the adversary has architected a tripartite network of human vessels. This grid relies on the unregenerate masses, fabricated ethnic proxies, and a highly managed, biologically inverted elite. This schematic isolates the baseline condition of humanity. Every person born in the image of Adam enters this world with a spiritual void. Without that internal barrier, the mind acts as an unprotected receiver. The demonic collective broadcasts silent, highly targeted suggestions directly into this void. Because these individuals lack a spiritual firewall, they seamlessly absorb these external broadcasts and mistake the whispers of a highly coordinated hive mind for their own internal private thoughts. This is an ancient intellect at work. For thousands of years, this collective has meticulously tracked human biological lineages and psychological patterns, compiling a transgenerational database of human vulnerabilities. When an unprotected vessel is occupied by multiple competing spirits, the resulting biological and psychological disruption is severe. To hide this intense spiritual conflict, the secular medical establishment applies sterile, materialist clinical labels to the behavior. A human vessel overrun by multiple entities fighting for control of the hardware is diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. When a target is sensitive enough to audibly hear the collective host, the system labels them schizophrenic. If the host cannot breach a believer whose hardware is permanently sealed by the spirit of truth, it pivots to horizontal proxy attacks. It targets the unprotected minds of unsealed spouses, family members, and close friends, weaponizing them as literal thorns in your side to obstruct the message. The overarching strategy of this psychiatric infrastructure is total diversion. By masking literal spiritual possession as a biological disease, the system shifts focus away from spiritual deliverance and toward a lifetime of chemical symptom management. The second layer of control requires a geopolitical decoy. During historical periods known as administrative resets, global controllers systematically injected a synthetic, newly coined word into scriptural translations. This linguistic manipulation manufactured an entirely new demographic category of people. By placing a false nation-state on a fabricated Middle Eastern landmass, the controllers constructed a horizontal diversion. This vintage cartography highlights the true center of the plane at the Arctic North Pole. The creation of this modern ethnic proxy serves to invert our geographic orientation, drawing human focus thousands of miles away from the actual location of Mount Zion. This demographic acts as a lightning rod for staged conflict. By engineering endless geopolitical wars in this specific region, the spirit world keeps the global population emotionally exhausted, financially drained, and perpetually divided. The elite networks managing these seceded lands leave a distinct administrative signature on their operations. In the Book of Revelation, the dragon's tail sweeps down exactly 1/3 of the stars of heaven, a literal third of the celestial host. A literal third represents approximately 33.3%. This percentage functions as the collective's administrative signature. In organizations like Freemasonry, the utilization of the 33rd degree serves as a telegraphed signal of alignment with this specific fallen third. This ethnic proxy demographic functions as a horizontal proxy. It replaces the true spiritual children of the promise with a strictly secular category, keeping humanity blind to the vertical reality of the king's true spiritual heirs. At the very top of the terrestrial hierarchy sits the apex host network. These individuals manage the seceded lands through a global biological warfare protocol known as Elite Gender Inversion, or EGI. By initiating extensive physical surgeries and lifelong hormonal therapies, this protocol severs the natural reproductive capabilities of the host. They become a closed biological loop, entirely reliant on the hidden systems of the matrix to maintain their heirs. To maintain the public illusion of natural reproduction, the elite deploy elaborate media narratives. Biologically male figures wear highly realistic pregnancy suits in front of the cameras, while the perceived male, the actual biological female, is disguised. To actually breed, they utilize a hidden surrogacy pipeline. Unsealed women are paid between $60,000 and $90,000 to carry lab-created embryos containing the inverted elite's genetic material. The text argues that this surrogacy scheme isn't merely about genetics. By manipulating the biological hardware at the test tube stage, the controllers ensure the embryo lacks the Genesis original design of the spirit of man. This creates an immediate spiritual void, allowing an ancient demonic intellect to inhabit the biological hardware as early as the embryonic stage. By possessing the vessel this early, the ancient intellect gathers sensory data from the moment of birth. The newborn is immediately subjected to severe physical inversion, creating a perfectly fractured, completely obedient host. These individuals live a continuous biological lie. Because their psyches are permanently splintered, they operate as managed flesh suits, vessels for the collective's dual-realm telecommunication. This elite class acts as the primary administrative interface for the hive mind. By intentionally destroying the physical boundaries between male and female, they execute an act of spiritual vandalism against the original binary design of the creator. Because these biological gatekeepers hold a monopoly over the cultural limelight, they must communicate their legionant allegiance to one another in plain sight, utilizing the medium of television programming. They deploy a specific visual telegraph system. A finger placed vertically over the lips is a silent vow, a signal of their strict commitment to the code of silence, ensuring they never spill the beans regarding their legionarian identity. Framing a single eye with the hands, or placing the interlocking OK 666 sign over it, acts as a visual confirmation of rank. It telegraphs total submission to the eye of deception at the top of the global pyramid. The common peace sign was created by this host to signal duality. It represents the forced merging of the masculine and the feminine into a single inverted vessel. The most aggressive of these telegraphs is the all-mocking tongue. From historical scientists to modern pop stars, this gesture is a coordinated signal of contempt for the unawakened masses. It is an open declaration of their perceived victory. The hive mind is laughing in the faces of its prisoners, confident that the chemical sedation and spiritual blindness of the public will prevent them from ever recognizing the trap. The moment a researcher begins mapping these biological and physical realities, the host triggers immediate psychological containment. Using a poisoned well protocol, they target messengers and brand them as a cult to terrify newly awakened seekers with the threat of social isolation. This frantic, coordinated push to maintain the illusion is driven by absolute desperation. The ancient hive mind knows exactly what time it is. The window of the little season is rapidly closing, and the divine leash is about to be pulled tight.